Okay, so this is like a nice little reunion you and I are having. So it's so
Yeah,
good to see you.
it's
Um,
nice to have one of these again.
yeah. I lose touch with everybody and I live under a rock quite often, but thank you for getting me out from under that rock and talking again. This target, I think, is uh, a direct result of people contacting me and asking me to start putting our remote viewing videos on YouTube so that they're more accessible. So I need to do that as well soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so on to this target.
Mm.
So I guess for the sake of the video, I had you remote viewing the Salyut 7 encounter that the Russians had in the 1980s, where they were in the space station, and then this orange light flooded in their windows from outside. They all went to look out of the windows or portholes, and what they saw uh, is quite a mystery. What they saw, they described as giant humanoid-like angelic figures that seemed to be living beings, winged things. And I was curious about what they saw. Was it an illusion, perhaps produced by some kind of a machine or unidentified aerial phenomenon, something like that. So my goal with this target was to, and you know what, I should read what the actual target says. And I have that written somewhere. You know what? I'm just going to read it off my phone because I'll find it quicker that way. But yeah, so I was curious as to what exactly it was that they saw. Was it a conscious being? Um, so the so this is regarding on July 12th, 1984, the cosmonauts reported a bright orange cloud that seemed to envelop the entire space station. They rushed to the portholes to investigate the source of the light. And so the actual target cue was the remote viewer will perceive, investigate, and sketch the true source of the anomalous light reportedly seen by the cosmonauts on board the Salyut 7 spacecraft on the 12th of July, 1984 only. So that is what you were tasked with. And I was very pleased with the data and your images, which um, match very, which somehow didn't surprise me. They were kind of right on what I was possibly expecting to see. So uh, before I start showing your images and going through your session, anything you want to say about this target?
Like a summary or
A
oh,
summary or your feelings about it or
well,
putting you on the spot.
every single time when I looked at your target number, I see a big orange. Every single time. And knowing what the target is, it would be this orange light. Um, with my remote viewing method, that's how I always start a session. I look at the target number and I receive these colored shapes. Now, the interesting thing is orange elements, usually for me, they are an item. But in this case, it was literally this orange. And I wasn't able to really figure out what this is because as I get a colored shape, I start probing them to get this blurry color to reveal its actual composition, its finer detail, its actual colors. And this one just, as all the other elements, starting as colored shapes, such as life forms always start as just a red element. As I probed everything started to become less blurry and reveal their finer details. This orange remained throughout the session as an orange. And as I was working, I was having a capsule, and RV wanted to call it the encapsulata. Very fine word for it. Turns out this would be the space station. So I had this encapsulata, which had people inside it, lots of technical details, interesting materials, machinery, clocks, all kinds. And with people inside it, and it always had this orange surrounding it on the outside.
Mhm.
So that's what I had. It was interesting.
And what really fascinated me is that right from the very start of your session, in the very first paragraph, you immediately started talking about this orange light. I went through your session last night and I started writing down um, your some of your impressions that were pretty immediate. And one of the first things you said is carrying the item, the orange element. Um, the life form likes it, orange element. Um, you like right immediately, you're talking about a life form and an orange element throughout the entire beginning. So you immediately picked up on that detail of this target, um, which was very exciting to see because so like there was no delay and there was no slow approach to this. You just immediately went straight to where you needed to be.
Yes, when I remote view, I pick up all of the main elements
Mhm.
from the start. And I can read to you for this target, the first element was life form. Then I get a solid wall. I get a moving part, which felt technical. Then I got a machine car. And then I got something which reminded me of seashells, but upon probing it, it was more like papers. And then I got the orange element and a couple more elements. So the elements I get at the beginning are the most important for the target identity. So the orange element didn't come first. Usually the main one comes first, but it came after a while.
Mhm.
Also, significant elements will be repetitive, especially if I'm probing a different element, say the life form or the machine car, and I'm probing it, expecting to learn something about this machine car or capsule, it shows me instead the orange element. That tells me the orange element is more important than the machine car. But I had it very early. Should I maybe read the earliest probes that I did, what I got for the orange element?
Yes, if you can get ready to read that, there is one thing I would like for that I think is very important here to mention right before we get into your session. You after I sent you the reveal, the target information feedback, one of the first things you said was how sometimes when you're remote viewing, you have a difficult time discerning between water and space. I can't remember your specific words there, but I think that's important to mention because some of your session, a lot of your session made mention of water when really, I guess your remote viewing. I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, I've been remote viewing for 5 years, and I have this one problem. If I have outer space targets, I'm likely to talk about there being water, when in fact turns out it was gases, because water and gases in space is very similar. It's a fluid thing. So I know to watch out for that. But I did tell you after the feedback, I didn't write it into the report. So,
Mhm.
but it is an important note. So in this
Yeah.
case, it was outer space, which did not surprise me because I had all of these fluid flow of things, which turns out would be gases. And I also do describe a lot of gases and gas
Yes.
pressures in this one, gas pumps and all kinds. So yeah.
And I think it should be an understandable thing for anybody who's new to RV and doesn't quite understand how it works or become doubtful as to its validity, that having cross comparisons and confusion between water and space, that should be expected and forgivable. Because when you think about an ocean, like you're dealing with very vast situations in both cases that both will often involve a space station or a submarine, which are essentially small, tiny habitats that are oxygen controlled in a very large, hostile environment. So it makes sense that there'd be some easy confusion between space
Yeah.
and a water target.
Another one that I still, after 5 years, I do tend to mistake is between sand and snow, because they're both this thing that you can pour on the ground, which consists of smaller particles. Like if I have a desert target, I might think it's snow or the opposite way around. So they're similar. In this session, I actually, for a long time, I was under the impression that it seems I have a submarine, which in hindsight is similar to a space station. So should I read the probes on this orange element?
Yes, please.
Okay, so
And if you
when
like, I can show it on the screen.
all right, yes.
All right, let
So
me,
it is in the beginning
okay.
where I have, if you scroll down a little bit,
I'm going to share my screen with you and then,
mm,
oh, sorry.
so in the bottom left corner, it is a secondary, it's actually a secondary element, which means as I get um, elements or colored shapes, they start out blurry. They can be a separate thing, such as an object or a life form or trees, anything. So as I get these colored shapes, I don't initially know very much about them. So I need to put them through a series of probes to investigate them further. And this is something I do very early. These are among the first steps in my session. So IE means initial element. It means the element came straight out of the target number. As for SE, it means secondary element. It means as I was probing an initial element, this is sounding so technical, but let's go. So as I'm probing an initial element, it shows me a different element, a new element. That means this element did not come from the target number, it came from another element, so I call it SE, secondary element. So that's that. Then I name it item on moving part. And I wrote in parentheses orange element because it was orange. That's the orange element. So first I gave it a tap probe. So I have this orange shape before me. I tap it several times. It reveals it to be solid, heavy, ballistic. Has so heavy, so made design, as if it was made to be heavy. Kills, disastrous, has killed, has a wetness on it. Now, keeping in mind that wetness could also just refer to the gases here. Is made of water, in this case, probably gases. Then there was this exclamation, which I probably sensed from a life form reacting to it. Life forms went inside the orange element. So there were always life forms inside, as well as the capsule was inside the orange. The orange was encasing. Within the orange was the capsule and the life forms. Hills, entrapment, a heavy garnison, wet would be gases again. Then I give it a flick probes, which is like a tap, but it's more powerful. Life form nearby. So the orange is glued on top of something. There was this sense of it being attached. And that would mean attached to the capsule because the capsule is directly underneath it. Is attached, fixed, is assembled. It is glued on It has a captivating audience, which are the life forms, the people in the space capsule we know now. There are many chairs here. I kept seeing people sitting on chairs in the capsule. It's owned by a life form. There's this sense of it belonging to someone. Then we have a push probe. No more movement, is not quick. Life form owns it, is up on a pedestal, is moved about and looked at, not wet in any way in this time. Then we have IP initial probe. I just put my hands on it a little bit. It's still a colorful blur, but I can start to figure out where I can put my hands a little bit. It's called initial. IP stands for initial probe, because the idea is that later I'm going to put my hands on it again once it's a little bit more clear before me. So this is just the starting out, put your hands a little on it. Is on a life form, is weighed carefully before it is put away. It's on a cart with wheels. It is blown up, exploded nature as in characteristic of this, on a life form, not wet in any way. It is glued, attached. So those are the initial probes on this element, and it's clearly indicating that there has been an explosion. We even had the word ballistic. Now, the reliability of this data, even though it's early in session, some of my best data is in these sections where I'm probing my elements early at the first steps of a session. So later in session, we also get data which indicates an explosion of some kind. Yeah, so this is a big text report, and I read it through again a couple of times. I have no indication of anything that would seem to suggest that this orange thing, which was wrapped around the capsule, would be alien or intelligent or anything interesting at all. It was very boring. There's nothing mysterious about it, really. It seems, after reading, if I had to logically assume what does my session say, I would say that probably there was some kind of a small explosion, some gas got out, and that it would be a gas enveloping the space capsule. That's the only thing I could get a hint towards from reading my report and from how I sensed everything. So whether this is the actual conclusion about what this is or not, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, that's very interesting. I took some of my own notes that I'll take a quick look at regarding what you're saying now. I just went through your session and highlighted toward the beginning a few things that I really thought were interesting. I'm just going to scan this really quickly. Okay, here we go. This also speaks to what you just said about it not being anything particularly mysterious. Now, because the cosmonauts said that they felt like it was an angel outside of the spaceship that they were seeing, or actually multiple angels is what they claim to have seen. I like that you specifically say, is nothing holy.
Oh, I have that in the report, I think at least 3 times.
Yes,
There's nothing holy about this.
yes, you write in there, it's like you knew to say, no, you're not seeing angels. There's actually nothing holy about this.
I also have an interesting, if I can add in between here, there's an interesting part where I'm getting an impression about one of the life forms, which is the people in the capsule.
Mhm.
And it said about the human is not that the pilot or a person is not made by intelligent design. And this is like where people created by God, by intelligent design. I was getting this strong information that no, this is very technical. There's no intelligent design. There's no God who created the humans in this story, in this target. To tell me this is rooted in technology, not religious beliefs.
Yes.
I also had this data in there.
Okay, and actually, that's a good segue into some of the images that you wanted to show. I'm going to pull up one of your images in particular where you are referencing the Salyut 7. So I'll share this real quick. All right, so what would you like to tell us about this image here?
Um, so the dome on the top.
Mhm.
Um, hang on, I'm really overwhelmed because there's so much data in here. I worked 1.5 days on this. There's so
Wow.
much.
Yeah.
So this is a paper tracing, which turns out is one of the best probes I have. I was surprised that it performed so well on this one. It starts with an actual impression that I get from the pure signal, which is from the target number, so that I know I can retrieve from the target number the most reliable bits. So I retrieved on this one, don't remember what I drew first as the root. It was probably the long stem in the middle, but I'm not sure. It could have also been the disc at the top. However, it doesn't really matter. I started with one piece and I drew it, and then I do a paper tracing, which means I'm moving about gently, investigating how do things continue from here. Like if I have the long stem, I move a little bit away from it to see what do I encounter? How does it continue? Does it stop? Is there another structure there? I call this the paper tracing. So this drawing started with one truly perceived piece from the target signal, and everything else that I have added, all the other bits, have been perceived with this paper tracing and constructing this composite structure. So the black cylinder at the bottom, RV wanted to call it the encapsulata. It's a fancy word. So that was the encapsulata, and we can see it on this Wikipedia page. We can see actual photos and a sketch of the space station, the actual one. And we can see the cylinder on the sketch. We can see the cylinder is at that end. The blue sharp thing at the very bottom seemed to me like a wing. I wrote that it's like a wing, and that would likely correspond to one of these, I think, solar panels on the station. I found some gold inside the cylinder. And there is the orange element is at the very bottom as well. I drew some orange there. There were people inside of the stem or structure. And you can also see that the proportions are very good. If you compare to the photograph on this Wikipedia page, you can see that the size of my people is very good with the size of these parts. On the top or other end, there was this big round structure with concentric rings. This is presumably, this is inside of the dome part, cap part. It had very interesting properties. I spent a lot of time inside of the dome. And you can see on the sketch on Wikipedia that it does in fact have this dome shape on that end. I found so many interesting technical details inside of the dome on my sketch. For instance, it was there was a strong heat conducting property on the internal walls. I could see how heat that would emerge inside of the dome quickly moves to the interior wall and gets dissipated upwards or out. There were crystals in there, some kind of crystalline substances, metals. I think I could read a little bit the technical bits that I kept finding inside of this large structure. So it started being called a machine car, which when I probed the machine car, I wanted to call it a capsule. And these are, CRVers would call this all AOLs when you give things a name, a noun. I don't call it that. I call it premature labels, which is, it's what I would call it now, but as I learn more, the name will keep changing. So this thing started being called a machine car. Later, after probing a little bit, it was a capsule. It had life forms in it. The orange element was on it, on top of it, surrounding it. Let me find some of the interesting technical details about this encapsulata that Arvi wanted to call it. I've highlighted them in my report. And also, in one of my probes, I wrote oily grease, it makes sparks. So I kept having impressions of sparks and explosions and things, a little bit, not a lot. It would seem gentle. Also have written a smoke rises from it, from the orange element. So at one point I wrote, I got suctioned into the orange element from the outside. A smoke rises from it, a spark ignition. And the orange element is filled with madness and confusion inside it. And here's another one, a car. Car has got life forms inside. Car has filled with sparks, is ignition fuel. There it is again. And let me find some more of the, now I'm going further down my text report and the technical details start getting more interesting. We also have a pump which releases and emits gases, which is part of this. There is a very expensive clock about the universe. There are lots of machinery pumps here, active operating. Some are letting out steam vents. There are sparks and ignitions in a piloted device. The orange element is full of technical equipment about travel in clouds. There are guys captured inside. They are running out of oxygen fast. A bunch of 5 or so men indoors in a tech-type room or square walls box-shaped room. Insulating capacity, which is insulating is, I wrote a note. Insulating is thermodynamics, such as when you insulate one compartment so that it stays warm, even though the outside is cold, so that the temperature does not equalize. A canister with carrying capacity. And scrolling down, we are people are already sitting inside orange element. They are waiting for a ride. A hovercraft filled with silver. This is the orange element with people inside it. A miles-high craft. So here comes the technical bits further down the report. The black canister on the bottom of the tall pillar is the encapsulata, registered as the encapsulata. It is not weak in any way. On the bottom, there are brown photons of spent energy on the bottom exterior surface of the encapsulata. At first I thought, what is brown photons? Then RV said it was spent energy. So it is like burned photons, I think, but I don't want to add any of what I think. But brown photons then made sense to me. A burnt fuel generator is found at wing area on exterior of encapsulata. Encapsulata is the black cylinder on bottom of tall tower. Tall tower is the spine of a machine device. This tall tower contains powder inside and ignition fuel. Presumably the powder is referred to here as ignition fuel, but there is ignition fuel there. A crystalline device made out of crystals. A glowing heat is emanated from it. It uses spent fuel as ignition. It uses spent fuel for ignition. It pumps up spent fuel away. People go inside this device, encapsulated. Just a little bit more. An ignition fuel, a fuel ignition. Glass interior, optimal optics, a heat repeller. A spent fuel smell. This is the orange capsule. People go down into it. They live here. Many monitor devices, monitors and repellents, repellents of heat. You need a gas mask to breathe here. Only monitoring takes place here, only monitoring activities. Heat is repelled easily by these walls. I saw heat traveling in gusts very quickly upward along the interior walls and sort of dissipating. It was very swift and incredibly effective. Just a bit more. The minerals have radioactive property. The orange encapsulates it, a time-traveling device. A crystal magnet, a device of counting time backwards with loopholes. Crystal magnets in progress. Heat is dissipated here quickly, easily. And now I'm in the top, where inside of the dome, in this floor of the dome with the concentric rings. And there I say it is covered in glistening crystals along the slopes. A suction pulls things up. So there was a strong suction within the dome from the interior walls towards center and then up. And conductors, heat dissipates from the conductors easily. There were heat conductors in the structure. Now I'm in the long stem. It has been scrubbed and polished to look like glass. It drops heat easily. It's covered in films of plastic. And these films of plastic stops the friction. So that if something were to move across it, this plastic material would prevent friction from appearing. Is filled with technology, beating devices, counters, devices that count, that keep track of radiation. The counters do that. The orange encapsulata encases the outer ring. And then the last part. Flying craft bounces off of air pockets, rides the air heat. Inside the flying craft, many doors and hatches, spent fuel. And then I had an automaton device, which seemed to me to mean that there is something automatic, like self-piloted about this. So lots of technological details, a lot to do with gases, and even more to do with heat dissipation, heat conductors, a lot to do with insulating areas from heat transfer. Very technical. All in all, it seemed to me, I don't have an answer what this orange element is, other than it surrounds our structure. And it would seem to be the result of heat and gas. Not very exciting, but that's the only sense I'm getting.
Yeah.
That's how Arvi was telling me so much about heat goes here, here's this technical detail, heat dissipation, and Arvi gave me a long conversation when I probed inside the dome. You see these brown rings. I probed that floor. Arvi gave me a long talk about how there's nothing mythological here. There's nothing special or strange. This is all to do with the natural laws of physics and how heat finds its lowest point. I could read that also, actually, please.
Mhm.
Um, this was very interesting.
Okay. And then I'll hop in with my 2 cents. I'm going to mute
Yeah.
myself so that you can share this.
So heat has found its lowest point of balance. And here we go. So I'm probing the concentric brown rings that are the floor inside of our dome. This was such a long talk from Arvi to tell me this is not mythical. This is just how physics shapes things into being. It seeks the lowest ground. This is a stabilization. It has happened all to stabilize, a stabilization of heat. Levels seek their lowest ground. This is describing a natural process in nature where things seek their lowest heat or lowest resting energy, and that this causes things to take on the shape and properties that we find them in. Heat seeks its lowest. Heat has sought out to rest. It seems to also be describing a process by which heat was once here, and then heat found a way to dissipate. Interestingly, also, we found the heat insulating walls of the interior of the dome above this encapsulata region, which also dissipated heat energy very swiftly. Yet here on the floor, it is instead describing heat having dissipated and found its lowest resting point at a time sometime in the past as having happened before. So our view was clear to me. Something has happened here to shape things into being, and that it was just heat finding its lowest resting point. No mystery, nothing mythological about what we have here. So that would suggest to me that this orange mystery, it's just thermodynamics, gases, and heat dissipation, completely natural forces. It was very nicely spelled out in the session.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That says so much. And I'll share my interpretation of what I've learned from this target in a moment. But it seems very clear coming from you. Uh, Now, have you researched anything about what happened on board the Salyut 7 after I told you what the target was?
No, I did not read up on this mystery of the orange
Okay,
color. I only
then
looked up pictures on Wikipedia to see what did my encapsulata actually look like.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, then I'll be happy to share with you now. But before I share details of my understanding of what happened on board, I'll say that this was a 100% blind target. When I gave you this target to work, you had no idea what you would be remote viewing. Um,
No.
yeah, so we did not discuss it. All I did was let you know that there is a target, and then I gave you the random sequence target numbers. And so all this data that you've given me back in return um, is purely from your remote viewing technique. And I did not retask you. I didn't tell you if you were close or redirect you in any way. This went from zero feedback from me to just letting you know what the target was. So this is all data you gave me based on nothing, essentially. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Is there anything you would add to that prior to
I
me?
would only add that I'm very careful also to note in my files which of my session files are verified by you. So I did send you the entire full text report, which has a summary written on the bottom. I sent you all 9 drawings, so all of before feedback. The only thing that I added after feedback was I forgot to write in the report. I thought of writing it, but I forgot that sometimes I confuse water with gas. So this bit is, or gas with water. So this bit is not part of the official verified report. My report has water surrounding outside. So the fact that I say afterwards that usually when I have space, I feel it as water instead of saying it's gas. And this thing I give after feedback, so it doesn't really count, you know?
Perfect.
So, but it's still good. It's still a good
Excellent. Oh
session.
yeah, that's very good. I find that very forgivable. I think space and water as mediums are very similar. And so I forgive that water and space can be
When
confused.
you remote view, it's just, to me at least, it's the same sensation.
Mhm. So, that being said, regarding the image that is on the screen right now, you'll see to the left is the image that Anita drew, and to the right is imagery that she later added that show the
After
Salyut 7
feedback.
after feedback, the Salyut 7 in comparison. So let's see. So yeah, so I had this image that Anita drew prior to her receiving feedback from me as to what the target is. So
All
now,
9 drawings, oh sorry, all 9 of my drawings I sent to you before feedback. So they're verified, I call it.
yes. So now that we've covered our bases on how blind this target was and how
Fully
well,
blind, as blind
yeah,
as it gets. It
completely
cannot get
blind.
any blinder.
Yeah, now I'm happy to share my understanding of what's happening in this target. And I'll leave this image up because it's all very, very relevant, I think, to the target. And wow, the way you have, through remote viewing, kind of debunked the mystery here.
I
Like
think
there's,
I have.
you basically said there is no mystery.
There
Uh,
isn't.
and that is a massive statement because it's very easy for this target to be interpreted as aliens and UFO. The mystery behind this story, as I said earlier, is very specifically the cosmonauts were on board. A yellow light was shown through the portholes or windows on their space station. They all rushed to look out, and they claimed to have seen large angelic figures that were luminous, very heavenly looking. And when they reported this back to Russia, um, back to their ground command, they were written off, and it was believed that they were hallucinating. Now, I know a lot of people in the UFO community like to look at that and say, okay, well, naturally, somebody that wasn't there is going to say that they were hallucinating and all of this stuff. Um, so I wanted to investigate this specifically. Were they hallucinating? Were they actually seeing anything at all? Since there were multiple people on board seeing the same thing. Now, you have not researched what happened on the Salyut 7 afterwards. I think
No, not at
anybody,
all.
yeah, anybody can Google what happened with the Salyut 7. And here's the exciting part for you, Anita. Now we're going to move on past the UFO sighting and go right into the technical stuff that happened. I don't know all the details because that was not the target. What actually happened on board the Salyut 7, they lost um, their heat to space. They had
No,
they had a space emergency and they needed to be rescued.
but
Um,
that's in the report.
it is. And so there are two separate elements. There are two separate elements to this, what's happening here. My intention was purely for the remote viewer to see the source of the yellow light or the orange light coming in. I was expecting to see some kind of a UFO mystery. And it seems that what you and your remote viewing data have given me instead is not a mystery. It's saying that there's nothing holy, there were no angels, there's nothing mysterious that happened here. What happened, you made mention early in your report of an explosion
Lots of,
and
not just, there's,
outgassing.
yes, all
Yeah.
kinds, early
So
and late.
so having an understanding of the Salyut 7 situation, when they claim to be seeing angels, they might have actually, according to your remote viewing data and my personal conclusions based on what I know to have actually happened, it sounds like what they may have witnessed is actually outgassing from their own space station, which may have ignited and exploded. They looked out of their portholes. What they saw was perhaps an explosion of gases that looked very beautiful and may have created a shape in space that they they interpreted it as something angelic and beautiful when really it was the predecessor to an emergency that they were having on board. Because they did have an emergency, there was a joint effort in rescuing the cosmonauts. Uh,
Was this at the same time that was connected to, both events were connected?
yes, I think
Wow.
you have found that there perhaps was a connection where perhaps the astronauts did not make the cosmonauts did not make that connection themselves.
But the sighting of this orange gas or orange light,
Mhm.
sorry, and the loss of heat, are these close in time or
I believe they are.
separate?
I'm gonna have to Google this
But this has
to
happened there.
see what the time difference was between the event of their sighting and when they discovered that they were having an emergency where they had lost heat
Yeah.
and their oxygen. You mentioned in your session a lot of complicated pumps and control of gases. They had a serious emergency on board where they had lost all heat and to the point where they were in sub-freezing temperatures and struggling to survive. And this probably also involved a loss of oxygen to the point where uh, um, they had to secure themselves in just one portion of the space station where they could maintain their life support.
Wow,
Uh,
because I also wrote, let me read that again. And this is all new to me, Fabian. I didn't look up any history.
I
I only
saw
looked,
your reaction when I told you about their
yeah,
emergency.
I've never seen this. And anyway,
Mhm.
it's a blind target. These guys are captivated inside, and I wrote parentheses meaning captured. They are running out of oxygen fast. A bunch of 5 or so men indoors in a tech-type room or square walls, box-shaped room, insulating capacity and so forth. Yeah, interesting.
Yes, that is very significant. It takes it sadly for me and UFO fans out there, it does take away the mystery of angel sightings and things like that. But it this I think this is a conclusion that was reached long ago, perhaps by perhaps the Russian government, that there's no mystery here, that they did have an emergency, and the emergency had the predecessor of a very beautiful explosion outside of their ship that
Seems to indicate so.
yes, it seems to
Oh,
me that you may have, through remote viewing, debunked something that was a mystery for many
yeah.
decades. Yeah.
There's also a lot of impressions of crystals, and there were crystals which were part of, either composed of or crystal ions being used, which is like salts.
And what that
And
says to me
batteries have
immediately,
those, for instance. So
yeah.
that was a significant part. I think Ari was trying to explain this big story about crystals, where the crystals came from, how they're being harvested. It was a massive part of this report, and I've drawn a crystal here as well, a big one. And this crystal I drew here was on the outside of space station.
When you mention crystals, the first thing I think of, if this is a situation of outgassing, losing gases and liquids, you know what happens as soon as gases and liquids leave a controlled environment and enter into the zero heat of space, you have crystallization uh,
Oh,
of liquids. So liquids,
really?
things that were liquids on board the space station, as soon as they went out into the vacuum, they would have immediately crystallized. And so you'll see this with gases and liquids of many sorts, that they will take on a crystalline form because they're instantly freezing.
Oh, of course,
So
of
and
course.
so to see an instant freezing of liquids, so you've now got an outgassing of crystals that very likely ignited and caused an orange explosion. Um, I'm thinking the cosmonauts looked out the window just in time to see a very beautiful and colorful explosion of their crystalline elements that of their life support that had leaked into space, which is very unfortunate because it was something to lead to an emergency where both Americans. There are some theories that perhaps the Challenger mission was going to collect, taking off from America to collect this space station, but that the Russians also had to send their mission to rescue these passengers. So, based on your report, this looks like a very cut and dry situation, which I think after this call, maybe I need to Google because right now I'm probably coming across as a bit ignorant as to the nature of the emergency, but I do know that there was an emergency where they lost all their heat to space and they were struggling to survive.
Hmm.
So, based on this remote viewing data and my not having Googled yet the nature of their emergency, it sounds like that's the direction that your remote viewing data is telling me to look.
Yeah, like there was, like I already mentioned it, I already read it out from the report, but I can say it again. We made a big deal about this. This is just natural processes, heat dissipation.
Mhm.
There's nothing mystical about this.
Nothing. You said at least two or three times there is nothing holy
Nothing
about
holy.
this,
I
what you were
think three
seeing.
times. Let me read those from the
Yeah.
report
So
quickly.
this is just like when people see in the stars, they'll see the Virgin Mary, or in cloud formations, they'll say, "Oh, it's the Virgin Mary," and people will gather and they'll see something that they associate with something holy. It sounds like the Salyut 7 encounter is another one of those situations where people are looking at a natural process, an
Yeah,
explosion in this case, and they're seeing something very pretty and holy when really it's all science. There's nothing holy. It's just you had a very pretty looking explosion.
I wrote, is nothing holy? Is not holy in any way. It is not holy. Three
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. Third time's a charm. I think this was a beautiful using remote viewing to get to the heart of the matter is valuable, so important. So
And
now,
add, may I please add to what you just said? And it needs to be done fully blind. Please, no front loading,
yeah,
no retasking, no clues along the way from the tasker monitor.
yeah,
None of that.
oh
Just
yeah,
do your own work blind. As you can see, it's possible. There's so much cheating on the blind condition
hmm,
among remote viewers. Just do fully blind sessions.
yeah,
It can be done.
hmm, it can be done. And your session was very complete. I believe you sent me 15 pages describing everything that you have just shared. So I guess we'll start wrapping up. are there any other images from your session that you would like me to pull up on the screen here that
Oh, I just saw on this one the two black lines that I drew going outward from the stem.
Mhm,
It corresponds to the wings or
mhm.
the solar panels. It's also part of it. I would
Yeah.
also add that on the left side where I drew a little yellow dome
Mhm.
with gray pebbles on it, that was something that broke and crumbled apart.
Ah,
I don't know how to find it in the text report, but there was something there indicated that something broke a little bit.
I see.
So,
Uh-oh.
other pictures, let's see. Not really. I mean, this is one of the last pictures, and the last pictures are always the more complete ones. The earlier pictures are just the colored shapes and not really so clear yet as to what I'm looking at. Um,
They strike me as subconscious imagery to get you to this point.
yeah. No, I'm happy with just this picture.
Okay. This was the picture that stood out for me.
Yeah.
The those leading up to this did seem like subconscious gatherings of thoughts and ways of getting to where you needed to be in this image, but this image seems to tell the whole story. Yeah. Uh, I think this is a brilliant remote viewing session. I look at this and I think, as much as I want to hear about mysteries and UFOs, I love it. I also want to hear the truth.
Yeah.
And having an explanation, a full explanation, something that closes the gaps of mystery. Uh, I mean, you can't get much more than that. And for remote viewing to go in a non-mystical direction, I think validates. So remote viewing is not about, oh, it's always about seeing UFOs. It's not about that. Under blind conditions, you have now looked at something that could have easily gone in a UFO direction and you negated that through remote viewing. This is not mystical. This is fully explainable through science and technology. You said it's all technical.
Thermodynamics, heat
Yeah,
dissipation, heat finding its lowest point.
yeah. So you've used remote viewing to take the mystery out of it and just say, nope, this was an accident that led, and it did lead to an emergency. So I'm so happy that you did not do any research on the emergency on board. I think at this point, now that we've had our talk, if you wanted to go online and Google it and learn about the nature of their emergency, I think I'll do the
What's this
same.
mean?
Yeah, I want to.
Um,
Yeah.
I would just add, I mean, yeah, I went to outer space and to this incredible, beautiful structure. I love remote viewing these technical things. It's so beautiful. But I kind of think in hindsight, like the coolest part of this all is that I went to 1984.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
was in
We
the
did not.
80s.
We
Wow.
absolutely did not talk about the nature about how you just time traveled. You time traveled to the past,
I was in
and
the 80s. Like
yeah,
I was in
1984.
1984. That's
Yeah. And what an amazing thing. So remote viewing is not limited by time. And we have full feedback on this target. There was one mystery target as to what the cosmonauts were looking at, and you chose to focus. Yes, you acknowledged that they saw an orange element, but I think you did an excellent job of going into the technical emergency that they actually had. Your session focused less on the explosion and more on the onboard technical issues. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, because if the tasking asks me to answer that question, then the signal will take me to show me what I need to answer that. I
Mhm.
wrote orange element or orange 57 times in the report,
Yes.
that it was on top and it was encapsulating
Mhm.
um, the encapsulata that RV called this space station and the life forms inside. So yeah.
So to wrap
Beautiful
this up,
session. I
yes,
I I loved
beautiful
working on
session.
it. Every time that I looked at the target's number, I saw the orange color. It was the main element. And good signal, and I love doing this one. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so
Good
much for
one.
taking the time to do it. Looking at your session, I know it's not something you threw together in under
One
an
and a half
hour.
days.
Yeah, I can tell. You
One
wrote
and a half
a
days.
full 15-page session, which
Yeah.
was
I worked hard. I
yes,
worked
you
hard
did.
on this one.
You really did. And the
I
images,
put in
like
the work.
it was perfect. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't ask for a better session than this.
Yeah.
So thank
Good.
you. Your session
And
was
fully
magnificent.
blind. Fully
Yeah,
blind.
yeah.
We're
Fully
showing that it
blind.
can be done and should be done. Fully blind.
Absolutely. And again, I'm just pleased that it was almost a debunking session
Yeah.
to come out in a venue where everybody says RV's always UFOs, and to
Mm.
say nope, not this one. This one
Yeah.
debunked a situation where people thought there was a UFO mystery, and I even went to it. So that basically says you didn't read my mind. You didn't go into my mind and say, "Oh, he wants to see angels and UFOs." You went to the intended target, and you didn't see any of that mystery stuff. You just went to the source of the truth of what we were actually looking for. So that says a lot about remote viewing and your skill. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you for tasking it and creating it was an interesting feeling signal. It was a wonderful signal to dive into and explore. So thank you for a wonderful place to go to,
Absolutely.
It was
Yeah. Welcome
fun.
back to 2023. I hope you enjoyed the
Yeah.
flight to 1984 and um so I guess I'm going to stop the recording here. Thank you again so much for this.
Thank you, Fabian. I love this one.